Welcome to another episode of the Digital Native Podcast, where we talk to technology leaders about what they've learned and what they're building. Today on the show, we have Jamie Davidson. Jamie is the VP of Product at Looker, who was recently acquired by Google Cloud. Jamie, thanks for joining.
Oh, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
So I'm really excited to have you on the show. I come from somewhat of a business intelligence background, and Looker is a company that a lot of folks are excited about. I know that at Google, we're very excited about it. But to get started, would love to hear more about your background and how you got into technology.
Sure. Yeah. I grew up in Silicon Valley and sort of worked at startups as a kid. I interned at Google in what was it? I think 99 or 2000 over the summer too, where I was in high school, very literally doing manual labor. I worked in the data centers, like literally swapping out hard drives for their servers, powering like Google search way back in the day. And then I went to university, came back and basically started at Google full time. So started my career at Google, spent about 5 years or so in Google too. And then went and did a startup, and sort of, the journey continued too. And there's a gravity to Google too. You can't get away too. So it's exciting to be back. We were excited to be acquired too and rejoined about 6 months ago.
And it's hilarious how you come full circle, starting at Google, and then now you're back. I mean, tell me about kind of the acquisition experience, and I'd love to hear just for you personally, when you first started hearing about Google as a potential place to be acquired for Looker. I mean, that had to be pretty fun and ironic.
Yeah, no, it was great. So let's see, just like for the timeline, we signed the definitive agreement the beginning of last summer, so almost a year and a half ago now. And I think, I think there was kind of everyone was universally excited. Like, Google is a great place. We were deep partners. We've been partnered with the BigQuery team, honestly, for 4 or 5 years then too. I knew the product folks, like we knew the field teams. We just had a really great relationship. And I think culturally, and even our sort of company missions actually were very much aligned. Google's sort of organizing the world's information, making it universally accessible and useful. Looker was very much about helping companies basically create value from their data and create value from their information too. So sort of from like a high level cultural perspective, there's a great alignment. From a product portfolio perspective too, we think it made a lot of sense too. So it's been great. It's been interesting. And so when I left Google in 2011 after my first stint, and all of Google at that time was smaller than Google Cloud is now. So it's definitely a change. From like a relatively small, very focused company to a giant company now. But there's a lot of really great sort of benefits that the resources and breadth have as part of Google now.
So let's talk about Looker a bit. I mentioned I come from the BI space a little bit. I work for a company called Good Data, which was Andreessen Horowitz backed, General Catalyst backed. We was there for 5 years, kind of the early days. When I started, we'd never heard of Looker. I let you know this. And then towards the end, Looker was just cleaning up. I mean, I had customers who migrated from Good Data to Looker, and I'd say, what happened? And they say, they'd say to me, Ryan, Looker is incredible. I mean, you just got to try it. And so that was kind of my first experience to it. Also the leadership that you guys had in place, Lloyd Tabb, who was, long time industry veteran, had been, worked with several Ben Horowitz companies. I just read The Hard Thing About Hard Things, so read about some of those earlier startup companies. But tell me more about Looker, the history, and what makes what the company does.
Yeah, totally. So Looker, we have a BI offering. We really think of ourselves though as a data platform first and foremost, and really it's helping our customers create value from their data. That's really sort of the high level premise. We did a few things really right, and honestly too, a lot of it is very fortuitous timing, Looker. Lloyd, basically, he was a serial entrepreneur, worked with a bunch of like really great great founder. He's, you know, brilliant technologist. The guy's like, he's forgotten more about databases than I will ever know. And I've spent, you know, my career in this space. He's, you know, absolutely brilliant. He had built something like what Looker became at 3 separate companies beforehand too. He basically repeatedly was building tools to help his internal team basically access their data and access, you know, transactional data and use it operationally. So use it to make better decisions. He tells a story about how one of the companies he was building sort of call center technology too, and he used something like Looker to be able to empower the end call center, you know, representative to actually access data that previously, you know, would have required folks writing SQL statements. So very much non-technical user, probably doesn't even know how to use Excel, suddenly, you know, getting the benefit of the expertise and the value of sort of the historical data, and, you know, enabling them to make better decisions. You know, the core pieces for Looker, just at a high level, you know, it starts with basically an architectural decision Lloyd made. He wanted to take advantage of basically SQL databases too, and so we've got an in-database architecture which allows us, you know, pretty uniquely inside the BI space to take advantage of, you know, novel cloud data warehouse technology like BigQuery, or like, you know, very candidly, we believe in a heterogeneous data environment. Google's very much, you know, a proponent of customer choice. We also support, you know, Amazon Redshift or Snowflake, and we've worked very closely. We've got lots of customers on, you know, a wide variety of databases. But we basically enable our customers to take advantage of the advances in technologies that we're seeing too. You know, look, Lloyd started Looker, what is it? I think, you know, eight or 9 years ago, and I think something like a year after he started the company, Redshift launched too, and actually was a huge catalyst for the adoption for Looker, sort of as a result of it too. We were great partners with them. We uniquely took advantage of that technology. On top of that in-database technology, and really the core of Looker, is a semantic model. This is really where Lloyd and Ben Porterfield too, who's also the other co-founder, their core innovation really drove. And it's a model that basically an analyst can come in and encode the data relationships and business logic to be able to power, you know, reporting against your KPIs inside a business too. And it basically enables an analyst to basically take all of the deep knowledge they've got about the business, about the data, about databases in general, the infrastructure, and encode it in a single place too, where end business users then can suddenly access it. So I was actually a really early customer of Looker's. I think I was basically the first not friends and family customer at a company called HotelTonight too, where you know, Lloyd pitched us and we bought. And you know, I managed our product and data and design teams, and we had a small data team that basically went in and created this Looker experience, and then empowered literally like 90% of the company was using Looker on a weekly basis too. So sort of truly democratizing access to data. And I'd say like the last real like kind of key piece too about Looker is we're, you know, basically also again just a benefit of timing more than anything else. Like we were built in the cloud. We were built cloud native in the browser, not a desktop application too, basically because it was now possible to do that and easy to do that. And so, you know, what it means is, you know, everything we built inside BI, we're building on top of our own APIs too, that are basically extensible then by our customers. So we can actually, you know, make it easy for folks to create experiences very similar to a BI experience to, you know, externally.
And I think that's interesting. You said, you know, timing was important. You were built in the cloud. A lot of companies I know were saying that they were cloud BI. I mean, how was Looker different? I mean, what did the cloud, I guess, enable from an innovation perspective and a competitive differentiation perspective?
Yeah, so you look back at like the history of BI, sort of, you've got like the very beginning of BI, or not, you know, 30 years ago. It's a long, you know, like an old industry where candidly, database technology was slow and expensive. So to be able to scale to, you know, greater and greater data volumes too, you had to go literally buy a new server, spend $1 million, go deploy, you know, a new rack inside a data warehouse, or, you know, in an IT closet somewhere. And BI was effectively very tightly coupled then with the data infrastructure, because it had to be. In order to add a new dimension on a graph, you had to go and change your ETL process and generate a different data cube and a data mart and power that graph. It took, you know, 3 or 4 months, and these are sort of, you know, The innovators then were, the companies like Business Objects and Cognos and MicroStrategy and ISOBIE and those folks. As a result of that, folks realized that they wanted to ask more questions of their data faster too, and suddenly you sort of had this second wave of BI in these worksheet style tools. So sort of the Tableaus, the Clicks, the maybe Power BI even too, sort of the latter end of that, where they're really based on an extract of data. You basically can slice and dice it and generate a really beautiful visual report. Very very simply too, given that extract of data. What was great was it dramatically increased the amount of questions you can ask of that data if it was present inside the extract. The hard part was what companies found as you proliferate those worksheets too, suddenly you end up with a bunch of different business logic effectively in every analyst's hands. So, you go to an organization, you ask the CFO, what's the gross margin? You ask the head of marketing, and what you ask the, maybe head of operations or something, what's the gross margin? You may get 3 different answers, 2 reasonable answers, but very different logic associated with it, different different data sets that they're pulling ultimately too. And so it's hard to make good decisions with sort of inconsistent data. Looker basically came along at the perfect time for it too. And because we took the point of view that, hey, databases are going to get super fast and super performant, and they're going to be moving to the cloud. So we do not have to build an extract engine ourselves. We don't have to build a query engine whatsoever. Looker is a very lightweight, application where we will push all of that processing to, whatever SQL data warehouse you've got, so Redshift or BigQuery or Snowflake, and it enabled us to effectively have a very, very thin, basically just desktop client too, where we manage the model and we manage the metadata and the content too, and become really a place for curation for that content too, and control, of course, on a net for access and sort of enterprise, grade sort of permissioning, but very much a lightweight content layer on top of that, and decoupled truly from the infrastructure. Whereas previously, in order to pull in millions of rows of data too, you'd have to have a very powerful machine to be able to go on your desktop to be able to go and do that. Whereas now we're just sending lightweight pieces of data to a client, to a browser.
No, that's great. And I think I'd shared this with you, but if you've seen how quickly the whole space has evolved, I took a course in college in 2011, kind of business intelligence 101. This book was written less than a decade ago, and if you read it, it's all about kind of that first world of BI, and to see how there's I think there's half a page on real time capability, and I mean at that point it was just kind of an idea, and this is less than a decade ago, but it seems like the companies who've been the most successful really understood where the industry was heading and really built their solution around that to take advantage of some of those capabilities. And for you guys, I mean, anything else that you think makes Looker unique or differentiated in the market? And then, I'm excited, obviously, about how you guys fit within the Google Cloud ecosystem.
Yeah. So I guess one aspect I didn't really talk about too, and we really do think, I mentioned we think of ourselves as a data platform. The core of Looker I mentioned is LookML. LookML is integrated with Git. And so, at our core, we are truly a development platform too. And we basically take sort of best-in-class functionality for modern software development practices too. So, pull requests, enabling, dev staging prod workflows, and basically bring it into the BI context or bring it into the data context too, so that you can create models that are controllable and governable basically by a software development lifecycle too. So you can have, the logic is ultimately verifiable by a human. You can have things like unit tests and continuous integration and continuous deployment sort of testing as a part of the definitions of your metrics, and then ultimately the representation of them too inside content, which is it's kind of a wildly radical idea for data, which is sort of funny too, because as software has gone through such an evolution too in sort of the same time frame, call it the last 30 years, where it's migrated to the cloud, and you've got very elaborate development practices too. Bringing some of the best in class practices to data and simplifying them too has been a big piece of why we've been successful as well.
No, that's great. And I'd love to hear, I mean, my favorite way to learn about companies is to kind of look at customer use cases and what your customers are doing with technology. Any that come to mind for you when you think about Looker success stories or customer stories, or what companies are able to do because of Looker?
Yeah, so they're a bunch. I think that the ones that resonate most with me are when people are making operational use of their data. And it's pretty unique that Looker can enable this too, because we ultimately were leveraging the underlying data warehouse too. You've got the full granularity of whatever data you've basically placed inside the data warehouse. It means at HotelTonight, for example, we could look at every single transaction, every single user interaction inside the application. We could look at every single purchase inside that data warehouse too. So very low level, very granular pieces of information enables you to drive, HotelTonight, the example where, I ran a product, they're a real-time marketplace. And so they were able to do, real-time inventory management based on that intelligence effectively that Looker provided. We've got lots of different customers on, retail customers managing supply chains. We've got lots of different customers in that sort of marketplace type use case too. The other area that I'm always really excited about too, because we leverage best-in-class cloud data warehouses, and these databases have gotten so incredible, like feels like black magic. True petabyte scale data, sub-second performance for queries, like BigQuery, can drive. We see lots of folks in sort of the digital native folks, the new media companies, the folks with really, really big data sets too. Maybe it's product event data, based on website traffic, where Looker enables you both to look at very high level KPIs and trends and the like. So for companies like BuzzFeed and all of the new media folks, they can see high level performance. They can also very literally tune their editorial against the real time performance as well. So very granularly looking at for a given article, how is it performing on each individual channel too, and how do they tailor the message to basically resonate more deeply with a given demographic or something. So I'm constantly amazed. This is like, it's such a fun industry to go and see how people are applying data, how they're applying sort of best practices, and using it to drive basically business outcomes. It's been awesome.
And let's talk about Powered by Looker a little bit too, because I think that's interesting. I think it's want to differentiate exactly what it is. Good data. I think we always claim that we came up with the Powered by Good data, but like any great competitor does, you take that, and we'd love to hear a little bit more about Powered by Looker and what your customers are doing with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, because Looker was built in the cloud, as a sort of cloud application first, we literally started as a platform. We started where, actually at HotelTonight, we bought Looker before there were visualizations or dashboards in it too. So I built, on top of Looker's APIs, I built in our company intranet a dashboard tied to the APIs to be able to go and visualize data so that other people can go and consume it. We bought it basically just as a data exploration tool. At our core, we've always been a platform, first and foremost. What we find that our customers are doing is oftentimes they'll use us for internal, business intelligence use cases. So to drive reporting, to drive insights, to drive action ultimately internally. And then customers will realize, hey, it'd be awesome if, maybe it's a B2B company looking at sales data. It'd be awesome if we could embed this in Salesforce, where the salespeople are sitting too, so that I can go and, do lead scoring or, find out a to-do list or figure out context about a given prospect, where I'm sitting inside the tool. And so could I just embed that in? And so we basically made it easy for folks to embed iframes. We see folks then going and saying, oh, well, now that we've modeled all of this data, we understand the insight internally, why can't we expose that and maybe monetize that to our customers? Maybe we can show them, here's a premium tier to be able to actually understand insight too, and maybe we'll build this into, our product itself, and make a new SKU and go and sell access to this data, and sort of enabling sort of that embedded use case. Then again, finally, we see folks really, going as far as sort of, completely custom applications where, we've got a very large retailer using us for basically to build a supply chain management application where the purpose is for regional managers to go and manage inventory and pricing levels. They're using Looker APIs to basically provide them governed access to historical data, because it turns out you want to look at historical pricing trends and historical purchase trends too, to be able to forecast demand. But the purpose of the application, literally using none of Looker's API or none of Looker's UI whatsoever, completely headlessly, exclusively using our APIs. The purpose of the application is, how do I manage my supply chain more efficiently? And just so happens you want to have data present when the end user is doing it. So, PoweredBy Looker really spans the spectrum. It's like the way I think about it, candidly from a product, everything outside of the BI tool that we can power and enable too. And that's where the vast majority of users are going to be sitting too. And that's where most of the value from your data is going to ultimately be realized.
So let's talk about the market a little bit. In your position, you're uniquely, I think, tuned into where the market's going, where it's gone, come from the last couple of years. What are some of the trends that you're seeing when it comes to BI? What are the challenges to doing it effectively?
It's a great question. So I think that there's a couple of different aspects. So one, data is proliferating, wildly, and it's through things like SaaS services. Like when we were acquired by Google, we had to do a big audit of all of the tools we use too. I think Looker we were like a little bit less than 1,000 people. I think we were using more than 1,000 different SaaS tools too. So more than a different SaaS tool per person, all of which has digital exhaust. As we use it, you generate data. You may want to aggregate that data too and use it to better inform it. So can you pull in your Salesforce data next to your Zendesk customer support data, next to your product event data, maybe next to your marketing data, and use them all to better inform your view of the customer, have a customer 360 or something, and use them all to better inform your sort of operations. Data is growing hugely. That's a clear trend. I think everyone sees it across the board. Internal data, third-party data, second-party data, sort of these SaaS tools and the like. Sort of in concert with that, though, thankfully, database technology and data infrastructure has dramatically improved as well too. It's a lot easier today to send data to Amazon S3, to send data to Google Cloud Storage, to send data into these data aggregation places like BigQuery, to enable you to derive insight from it too, and the infrastructure to enable you to wrangle it. And finally, what we see is it's not just enough to have sort of dashboards and self-serve analytics. What classically is thought of as BI, so sort of the dashboard and self-serve analysis or sort of discovery tools, that's not nearly enough. You have to reach every business user where they're sitting. So it's got to be it's got to be an email, of course. It's got to be a mobile application, of course. It's got to be inside Slack when people are communicating within Slack. And how do you take data and take insight to and bring it to every knowledge worker, because that's ultimately how you sort of derive business outcomes and ROI, is how do you inform these decisions, make better actions too. So sort of like in concert, it's basically huge amount of data, but thankfully I think the infrastructure has improved substantially to be able to wrangle it. But now you've got to take that data, derive insight, and ultimately get it into the hands of your knowledge workers too. And so we think we're unique that we help stitch together all of this. We help you relate your data. We help you take advantage of this cloud infrastructure. And we very much take a platform-focused view where, of course, we've got reports and self-serve analysis, but we want to make sure that all of that can sit inside your business users' hands.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I think about stats. I used to hear about, BI applications being adopted by 30% of the organization and 70% use it. What are you seeing today in some of the challenges when companies come to you and say, where do we start? I mean, I think people understand how important it is to leverage their data and the competitive advantage it can create for them. But I mean, what are the most important things to measure? Where do I start? Yeah,
it's a really good question too, because honestly, it's interesting. I think it's so much less of a technology problem and so much more of a procedural people, process problem too. It's like, how do I ultimately become a data-driven, organization? I think it's we recommend effectively a phased approach too. I think it's great to start with specific use cases that are very, very tied to data. And I think a lot of folks see this in sort of areas where it's maybe a little bit closer to the revenue. So marketing and sales focused sort of organizations. I think it's great. There's clear sort of ROI associated with it too. But starting with specific use cases and going and developing full infrastructure along those lines too. So pulling in all of your Google Analytics data into BigQuery and empowering a full organization to derive insight from it. We've got a large retailer using us to both like better understand and optimize their marketing spend too. But ultimately, they take that marketing data and that performance data that they get from Google Analytics, and they give it to their merchandising team, and they give it to their supply chain team too, so that they pick the right next new product, because they want to be able to adapt to the market as quickly as possible. So it's finding a specific use case and then driving it to ultimately to that business outcome too in general. And then what you find is that use case, that team, that infrastructure ends up serving as sort of a center of excellence. They serve as like a great reference point that's repeatable across the organization. Because you know what? Once you've looked at that marketing data, of course you want to tie it to, finance wants to go consume that. And so like suddenly you get a finance use case, or sales wants to say like, hey, how do I tie, drive more MQLs or something? Or how do I get more leads into my teams or what areas? It's suddenly you get a full organization where there's sort of nonlinear value actually as you add in these different use cases, and you get sort of different cuts of the data and different value from it too. But sort of, I'd say start small, deliver real business value, and then sort of use that as a way of proving out, sort of a plan or best practice, and then effectively take that to other organizations too.
It's really interesting, and you spoke to the culture aspect and how important that is. I spoke to ZoomInfo's CEO Henry Schuck in a previous episode, and he talked about how, as an organization early on, they would change something, and they felt bad about it, and they'd change it again, and they'd say, hey, sorry, we just changed this thing that we previously changed. And at some point he said they stopped all that, and they said, hey, wait, this is who we are. This is our DNA. If we find a better way to do something, we shouldn't be apologizing for it. I mean, we should be, making a data-driven decision like this across the organization. But it's funny for some reason that it's not natural to do that.
And I think a lot of it's about, how do you create transparency? How do you create, basically align everyone against the goals and sort of communicate goals, and then make it easy and, sort of democratize access to that data too. Like make it so that everyone can go in, understand the data and understand the decision-making process, and go and drive for better improvements too. Because I think it is a cultural thing. You want to have a data-driven culture. It means everyone should be able to access it. Everyone should be able to ultimately ask questions of it too. And the data should be paramount. It's sort of it should be self-evident effectively what decisions should be because of the data.
Mm-hmm. But I think it's tough too, because sometimes we look for what we know, and we listen and try to hear.
That's right.
So I read a McKinsey study recently. It's estimated that companies who don't embrace AI and machine learning will decline by 20% in the next 10 years. So by 2030, same time, I think there's opportunity for companies to really double, their cash flow in the same time. Where's this space headed? How's this, going to impact the BI ecosystem?
Yeah, so I think it's really important. I ultimately think it's about how do you decrease the friction from finding insights in your data, and so how do you make it as easy as possible? Like it's not sufficient to be able to ask questions for data. How do you maybe automate some of those questions too, or how do you help prompt the analyst or prompt the business user to be able to drive and ask questions of the data too, ultimately to still change decisions and to change actions and drive business outcomes too. And so I think a lot of the way I think about how AI and ML is going to come into BI is it's again about like, how do you reach that end business user? How do you make that decision that much easier? So it's novel interfaces to make it easier for folks to actually ask questions of data. Maybe it's things like natural language. BigQuery just released their data Q&A, being able to access BigQuery data via like natural language like interface too. Of course, I think that's super interesting. And Looker, we've already got a semantic model where you've got an analyst who's an expert in the business and the data, who's already curated effectively a vocabulary on top of that data too, to give you a constrained way of accessing and asking questions of the data too. So super excited about that area. I think that Google is very much a industry leader, really across the AI and ML space, pulling that type of technology. I think of other areas where it's like, hey, Looker's got a feature called analytical alerts, where we basically will look at your data and conditionally send, we'll send a webhook to Slack and say, hey, this KPI you care about changed substantially. Go and take a look inside Looker, or we can do send an email, or change, create a customer campaign or something like that. I'm sort of hitting a variety of different sort of API endpoints. I'm really excited about thinking about what happens when that becomes smart and that becomes easier for an end business user to use. So a given analyst or a given even business user can say, hey, I care about this KPI. Let me know when it changes, or tell me what I should be caring about, if it's significantly different or not. Like, I don't want to have like a hard condition on it. Instead, say, like, just let me know when it's changing over time too, and maybe even go a level deeper and ask a series of other questions too, and tell me what's driving that change. And so what's influencing, if my conversion rate from my funnel is substantially changed? Is it because like the page broke in a given country that I haven't QA'd it in? And so, like, how can I drive more questions to be asked to the data too in a way that's not noisy? I think that's really exciting. But I do think that our sort of premise is it's strictly better once there's meaning applied to that data too. So that semantic models is necessary for you to be able to actually go and ask those questions. But I completely agree. I think that folks are going to need to, how do you ask as many questions for data as quickly as possible? How do you remove the friction from it? How do you ultimately drive better decisions off of that? And that's the name of the game.
And I'm excited about the potential. I mean, I think about the Spotify use case and what they're doing with Google Cloud, and how they're able to scale, a unique, customized, really delightful experience every year with their annual playlist, and then scale that to millions and millions of people. I mean, you think about some of the possibilities that companies and software companies are going to be able to do across, different industries. I mean, that's just music.
Absolutely.
But last question, Google Cloud Looker related, I have for you.
Yeah.
Anything that you're particularly excited about that's I guess public that you can share on the roadmap, with Looker, with Google Cloud, and what you're excited about?
Yeah, so I think there's like a huge number of things we're excited about. Like, honestly, like taking advantage of the AI and ML stuff we just talked about, I think is really exciting. Google's industry leading there, and so like pulling that in is gonna be great. A closer relationship with BigQuery, we're really excited about it as well. We've been partners for 4 or 5 years. We are as tightly integrated as you can be. I think there's cool stuff that we're going to be doing, and we can talk about probably more going forward too, about how things like the model can be present inside BigQuery, and we can sort of have some of the semantic definitions and like relationship stuff at an even lower level than Looker too. So there's definitely a lot. I'm really excited about BI Engine. It's a sort of an in-database caching layer inside BigQuery too, to drive sort of sub-second performance and like high concurrency use cases too. Very much perfect for BI dashboards and the like too. So sort of the acceleration there, we support that already, and we're really excited about that rolling out. So there's sort of like no end of things too. But one area that we just released, and I think this itself is interesting, and then also too, I think this is a pattern I'm really excited about as well. We just released a series of what we call Looker blocks for Google marketing data. So for Google Analytics 360, for the Google marketing marketing data for search analytics, or for search ads 360 as well. We've got a series of basically pre-built models and pre-built content to replicate basically the best-in-class analysis, partnering with those teams internally now that we're part of Google, which has been really awesome. And then enabling our customers to use those as effectively accelerators and take that pre-built package too, and then extend it. And so make it easy for you to pull in your sales data, to pull in your product data, to pull in your, customer support data and such. So that you can have sort of that 360 view, which is ultimately what a lot of our customers are actually driving towards. They want to understand, the behavior, performance, and all of the touch points, really viewing their customers. That's awesome. I'm really excited about that suite. We'll be investing heavily there. We've had a bunch of really great feedback along those lines too from some like really large customers. That's gonna be a model for us though, because Google is such a broad company, it's awesome. It's a little bit intimidating, I'll admit too, as a tiny startup now being consumed by that full mass. But working with a wide variety of teams to become sort of that front end, the place where you can deliver and sort of showcase, whether it's GCP's like logging information. And so like all of the network traffic stuff, and can we showcase dashboards and make it easy to drive insight and ultimately change behavior there? Can we do similar things, partnering with Google's Chronicle? It's like a security logging company. Can we showcase, incident response and help you diagnose those responses too? It's like perfect use cases for us. So just more generally, having Looker involved with these types of solutions to delivering end user values, I am so excited about partnering, deeply with all of these teams.
And I'm excited as well. I mean, I get asked by customers a lot, why is Google Cloud the fastest growing cloud provider? I mean, since I've been here in 2.5 years, we've gone from, I think, 2 to 13 billion, which is just incredible growth. And what I tell them is, because we're helping, business applications and customers create those same consumer-like experiences, magical experience they have. And when you have a product like BigQuery that Google uses internally for our own, 9 applications that have over 1 billion users, and then we open that up for our competitor or our customers to start to use, I'm really excited about it. And BigQuery specifically, I think is one of our best products that probably deserves the most marketing. And so I'm really excited about a company like Looker partnering and integrating and what's going to come over the next year or two.
Absolutely. And I think about it very much as like, how does Looker help showcase the value, and how do we help you, create? Because BigQuery, you're exactly right. It's hugely differentiated. Honestly, sometimes feels like black magic. It's amazing what they do. But functionality like BigQuery ML, the machine learning functionality available via the SQL interface too. Looker, can uniquely enable customers to go and take advantage of that type of functionality too. We support it, today, and supported it before. I think it's sort of why I think the acquisition made so much sense, just sort of from a complementary portfolio of product perspectives.
And the serverless capability and what that enables our customers to do. I mean, I think that's the largest differentiator.
Definitely.
So moving the conversation now a bit more personal. To round it out. What have been some of your biggest challenges as a tech and a product leader? And then were there any leadership skills as you look back in your career that maybe didn't come naturally, that took you kind of more time or focus to develop?
Yeah, I mean, those are great questions. So definitely no shortage of difficulties, and honestly failures as well too. Hopefully each one's a little bit different than the last, but let's see. So I guess maybe one that's worthwhile. So when I left Google, actually, I left to start a startup too, with actually a guy who is from Google then as well too, and also now works at Looker with me as well too. So we've had quite sort of the continued journey. We started a company for better or worse. We basically started not a Groupon competitor. We sort of went the opposite direction, where we wanted to help restaurants create last minute, access to really high end places and sort of sell them as tickets as opposed to reservations. And we raised some money and had honestly a fair bit of success even in San Francisco. We realized relatively quickly though that the industry was a difficult one and really not sort of well suited to our own sort of personal unique sort of skill sets, where like it was very much a sales and customer support heavy problem, where me and my co-founder were very much like deep data and product and technology people too. So sort of the sphere of influence and sort of like our expertise wasn't well suited to the company. And we like kind of fortuitously, I mentioned how HotelTonight was an early Looker customer. We were chatting with HotelTonight, realized it was the same exact idea in space too. They'd applied it to a vertical that made a lot more sense too, and they had a lot of that deep sort of customer focus and sort of sales focus already, and we sort of could bring the sort of technology and product focus too. So sort of sold that company to them, sort of found a happy way to sort of marry, we sort of rebuilt their backend technology and then applied it, to their business. So sort of, I think there's a lot to be said for sort of like doubling down on your strengths. Forget about trying to sort of round out your weaknesses and find complementary partners where, like, for us and the HotelTonight folks, they had excellent marketers, they were excellent sales folks, they had great sort of operational expertise too. So we fit really well together. So at a high level, that was at least one takeaway. I'm trying to remember. So you asked about like skills that don't come naturally. That's another interesting question. Like I think, I mean, there's probably a lot of different skills that don't come super naturally too. Like, I think that in general, especially too, as you come out of school, you want to be like well-rounded, you want to get A's in all subjects, you want to like be great. I think that like sort of the same message, like knowing where to focus, knowing where which areas where you needed to be good enough, but not necessarily the best. I think that was key. And I guess actually, maybe the takeaway for me, I started as like a technologist. I was like an engineer at Google to begin with. I was never like a deep salesperson whatsoever too. But I've realized over the course of my career that as you get more and more senior and more successful, sales is just about influencing people, and it's about finding common ground and finding sort of ways to solve problems together too, that it's mutually beneficial almost always. Like a good sales process, a good internal sales process, a good pitch is very much about finding that common ground where you can help each other out. And like that was an area that wasn't natural for me too, but took a long time and almost like a reorientation. Like I thought it was like sort of the used car salesman, like I'm going to fleece you, and if I win, you lose. And I sort of like, as I sort of slowly but surely developed, I realized that it's all about building relationships. It's all about like kind of actually being net beneficial and helping each other together effectively and finding the ways to solve high level problems. So that was an area where sort of technology. I'm still not probably a great salesperson, I'll be candid, but like sort of technology, it wasn't necessarily the best there, but like it's something that you realize that is actually absolutely essential for all sort of functions, no matter what.
Absolutely. And I think, sales specifically, coming from that background, we see it done so poorly in so many different areas that we associate, and think, I never want to do that. And I have so many friends that are like, oh, you're in that industry? Like, sorry. But for me, I read a book in college called Never Eat Alone by Keith Farrar. It kind of changed my whole worldview. And it's about that sales and networking is about making other people successful. And when I started thinking about it through that light, I thought, man, that sounds like the best job in the world. There's another book called Never Split the Difference that's about negotiation and win-win. Just makes me think of that. Any specific times for you, Jamie, that you failed as a tech leader? And what?
I mean, I sort of characterized that startup honestly as like, we sold the company and like it was a good outcome, but like it wasn't what we were hoping. We were hoping we were going to transform the world, and sort of I had come from like the ad world inside Google, where like yield management, revenue management, like an optimization of inventory was all about, was sort of the name of the game too, and using technology to go and drive, the right price for the right person, in the right context. And so we wanted to bring that to local businesses, and that was a very difficult process too. So definitely learned that, that it would, I think there's something interesting there. I think that there's room to improve. And I think honestly too, inside COVID, I think that there's like a lot of reason to try and improve and help out local businesses. But I'm not sure I'm the unique person to go and solve that problem.
So this one, I'm excited to ask you. You've worked at large companies, obviously Google. You've worked at Google when it was a smaller company, and you've worked at startups. What advice do you have for a young tech employee who's just getting started, and then also specific to the size of the organization? I mean, should I be looking at something, a startup, or a large organization? What advice do you have?
Yeah, well, so for a young person, they should be really focused on learning and like what they can do. And I like there's no right size company. There's no right industry. There's no, honestly, it's sort of different, like sort of different optimization for a different person. I loved spending time at Google when I started my career. I thought it was awesome. It was a really well run, large organization. I thought I had learned a bunch of best practices. I had like deep understanding, and honestly too, there's sort of areas in Google where, like honestly, like when I was from when I was a young guy, they were 10, 15 years ahead of the industry, from a technology perspective, which is amazing. So sort of see the future already being implemented too, and you can take that and sort of generalize from it, externally. So that was incredible. The flip side though is you're much more constrained. Like I was on a small team in a small, I started in ads. I worked on ads quality, sort of like a data scientist. And I was very narrowly focused on like ranking, pricing, targeting, search ads. So like I knew a whole heck of a lot about that, and I knew a ton about the infrastructure for that, but I did not know at all about the sales process. I did not know at all about marketing it. I didn't know at all about search or all of the other sort of ancillary services that sort of become, because you at a big company, you're focused on delivering your sort of unit of incremental value. Whereas at a startup, everything, like if there's a million problems, way more problems than people to solve them too. You see a problem, you fix it, and it's like literally you see the full scope of the business, which is incredible. That said, though, you're figuring it out as you go, so you're not necessarily learning best practices. You may be in fact actually kind of repeatedly recreating problems or issues. But like there you sort of, like I'd say, if you go to a small startup too, you want to find like a startup where like you surround yourself with excellent executors. So like for Looker, it's been awesome. Like, Lloyd's deep technologist, Frank Bien, is the CEO. He's been in the industry for a long time. He is an incredible operator. Like he is, we've hit, God, I used to know this off the top of my head too. I think we've hit 30 quarters in a row of our plan. And like, which is not like we've done incredibly well, grown incredibly quickly, not been sort of sandbag plans. Like it's a machine. It's a well-tuned machine too, and being able to come in and watch and learn from folks that are truly expert at taking companies from call it like $1 million in ARR to hundreds of millions in ARR. Like watching that process is incredible. So it sort of varies. Like I think you can do well at any other, at any size company, depending on what you want to do. I'd say generally the one piece of advice I always try and give folks is like following your passion is incredibly important. I think it means that you're going to work harder. It's not going to feel like work, and you're going to become better at that area than the really the competitive set. Then like the other folks going to go doing the work. And so if you're passionate about an industry, if you're passionate about an area, if you're passionate about a size of company, if you're passionate about a problem, go and follow that too, and find the best place for you there. And like, you may learn that you don't like the small startups, you like the big companies. You may learn the vice versa, and that's okay. But just sort of following your passion is not going to do you like a lot of harm in spec.
I think that's great advice, and I think the two go hand in hand. I mean, learn, experience, and then as you learn, find that passion and follow it. I completely agree. Find that sweet spot of something that you really look forward to going toward every day. It's easy to get good.
That's right. That's accurate.
So for you, who last couple questions, who do you look up to in the tech community?
Oh, like a ton of folks. So like before Looker, like basically after HotelTonight, I joined a venture capital firm, Redpoint, and Redpoint had invested in Looker Series A. And I joined actually because there was another guy who I worked with at Google, Tomasz Tungus. It was like a good friend, and he was on Looker's board, led the Series A investment in Looker. He's just like he's got a blog. Talks a lot about SaaS companies and sort of data-driven companies as well. Very deep thinker, like really good human being too. So like I feel like I continue to look up to him and definitely always learn a bunch from him too. Sorry, that's the one that popped to mind at the very least. Yeah, no, great answer. And last couple, I mean, outside of Google, outside of Looker or work, what's something that folks might not know about you? Oh, good question. I've got three kids under 6, and so in the midst of figuring out how to make remote kindergarten work and preschool when kids can't go outside because the AQI is like in the 200s. So figuring that out at the very least. Never a dull moment though. You have me beat. I have 3 under 7 years old, and so can empathize. I saw somebody write the other day, I had to sit through an hour all hands today, and then I realized that my kids have to sit through 6 hours every day. That's exactly right. Yeah, especially for a kindergartner. Wow. Yeah. Well, great. Well, Jamie, I had a blast talking to you today. If I'd like to learn more about your work and Looker, where do you recommend I get started? Yeah, so Looker.com. We have basically a very comprehensive overview of the product, of the solutions, of the industry, of the customer use cases and the like too. And definitely look forward to talking more. I really enjoyed the conversation though. All right, thanks again, Jamie. Awesome.